A lot really did get done as far as the 100 days of the Trump administration is concerned, which is why we are continuing this campaign of 100 hours. As far as his biggest hits, well, the one big hit that one must give credit for Donald Trump to is the fact that he did start the conversation regarding the Russia-Ukraine war. The war had been in almost a frozen state where nobody was talking. So at least he started those communication lines. That's a big hit for Trump. He hasn't been able to end the war in 24 hours, as he's been saying, is the big miss. The other aspect, of course, is the fact that he brought about greater clarity with regard to the immigration issue. Border crossings are now at a record low, but so are his ratings, because people say that he's been now completely focused on immigration, on trade, and that is having an impact on their daily lives, economies of people and their households. And in fact, trade policy, the way it rattled global markets, investors, is something that is yet to be decided whether it's a hit or a miss. But one thing is for certain, it has really impacted global trade, as we know, and which is why it's important to get an important voice to talk more about global trade, how Donald Trump's tariffs impacted economies and what lies ahead. Joining us on the broadcast is former Trade Minister of Australia, Stephen Ciobo, who will be giving us a detailed lowdown of the Trump tariffs, the trade tensions it brought about, and what lies ahead. And Mr. Stephen, let me start by asking you just that the trade tensions that one sees right now have been brought about by, to a large extent, due to the Trump tariffs. Do you see these continuing going forward, or what do you think is the outlook for global trade, given the fact that trade is so central to Trump administration and their policies?
There's no doubt that trade is becoming more difficult. We are seeing globally a shift towards more protectionism, a shift to reorient a lot of the supply chains, terms such as friendshoring, reshoring being used repeatedly. The fundamental requirement that a lot of countries are going to have to navigate over the coming years is to determine whether or not they believe they can pursue their best economic goals by focusing on liberalised trade and liberalised investment, or whether they want to retreat to a more protectionist policy approach. And I think history shows that protectionism generally does not work.
Which brings me to ask you, what is the kind of impact on Australia? And Australia is a country which has its deepest strategic links with America, but deepest trade links right now with China. So how do you see the impact on a country like Australia?
Australia has for many decades pursued a policy by governments of all persuasions to have free trade, or certainly liberalised trade and liberalised investment. The fact is that the last 70 years, 80 years of policy orthodoxy has shown to the world the benefits that flow from liberalised trade investment. When we have a more protectionist environment, it makes it more difficult. Now, thankfully, Australia's government and the opposition are united in their approach to say, no, we want to maintain liberalised trade investment and are not retreating to a protectionist environment, because they know that protectionism would actually lead to a lower standard of living for all Australians in the future.
And how important is the 90-day pause, or the window that exists right now for all countries apart from China, where right now we just have the 10% base tariff that has been imposed? How crucial do you think this is to be able to finalize some sort of trade deals?
It's very clear that the Trump administration is wanting to do deals. I think every country has an opportunity now to speak with the US administration with a view to saying, you know, how do we move forward from this? President Trump has made it clear repeatedly that he is looking for reciprocity in terms of US markets, access to markets, and US trade relationships. So fundamentally, I think countries that are feeling a more punitive tariff need to make sure that they are allowing US products, US goods to have access to their markets in a way that doesn't disenfranchise or disadvantage the US. But then there's also the other side of the equation, which is, for example, Australia, where Australia has a free trade agreement with the United States. There are no tariffs imposed on US goods coming into Australia. So there's no justification for the 10% that is being imposed by the United States on Australia. But ultimately, it comes down to governments being able to have those conversations with the US administration and move past where things are now to a better future.
Right. Given the fact that Trump administration views diplomatic ties through the prism of its trade relationships, through the prism of the trade balances and the trade deficits it runs, is this the new normal for diplomacy going forward?
You cannot separate an economic relationship from a political relationship. Of course, countries are focused on what they can do economically, and that spills over in terms of what they can do politically and vice versa. If countries can't find alignment politically, then it's very difficult to find those opportunities, that low-hanging fruit, to be able to conclude deals economically. So those two go together hand in hand. It's very important, though, that we continue to build as much as we possibly can. Liberalise trade investment throughout the world, because we know that for all countries, there are benefits that flow in terms of increased efficiency around the allocation of capital, increased opportunity for employment, increased opportunity for sales. All of these things ultimately make all countries richer.
Right. And Stephen, given the fact that the next couple of weeks we will see a lot of these countries coming out with their bilateral trade pacts with America to cut down the tariff impact, is this now going to be the future of global trade? No WTO, no multilateral trade, more of these bilateral trade pacts where people try to insulate the impact of Trump tariffs?
The World Trade Organization is going to continue to have a number of challenges in front of it. It, of course, had to grapple with the fact that for quite a number of years, there were not appointments made to the appellate body, which made the work of the WTO more challenging. The fundamental test for the WTO is, can it change? Can it amend itself? Can it revive itself to make sure that it continues to be an important body into the future? The world is looking for more stewardship than ever when it comes to navigating the tricky waters that we have around trade investment. That's a key role that the WTO can play. The question is how the WTO is best able to leverage its relationships and leverage its voice to maximise the arguments about why we need to be engaging in more trade, not less.
All right, Stephen Ciobo, former Trade Minister of Australia, decoding the impact that Trump tariffs have had on the world and on Australia. Thank you so much for speaking to NDTV.